morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to Global Atheist News. This is our report on the impact that religion has had on humanity over the last 7 days. Dateline, 28th of January 2023. This week's headlines. The Taliban Men-Only Aid edict divides the charity community. Turkey condemns vile Sweden Quran-burning protest. Burkina Faso military government demands the departure of French troops. Israelis stage a giant protest against the Netanyahu court reform proposal. The first woman pastor in the Holy Land is ordained. Indian students watch a blocked BBC film about President Modi despite the power cut. The Archbishop of Canterbury will not give new prayer blessing for gay couples. A lockdown gathering claim at St Mary's Cathedral in Newcastle is to be reviewed. At March for Life, a jubilant crowd prepares for the state-level fights. Hamline University retracts its Islamophobia charge as the instructor sues. Losing their religion, why US churches are on the decline. Pope Francis calls for an end to anti-gay laws, and LGBTQ plus people should be welcomed to the church. This story is fast developing. It started with the Taliban's 24th of December decree barring women from working in national and international non-governmental organizations. It's another devastating blow to women's rights in Afghanistan, which also threatens to plunge the country that's beset by hunger and natural disasters even deeper into a public health crisis. The United Nations and its humanitarian partners have engaged in intense negotiations to persuade the Taliban to reverse the edict. But for now, many NGOs, which depend heavily on female staff, have made the heart-wrenching decision to suspend their operations, which provide vital food, hygiene, and medicines. The decree also jeopardizes the global campaign to eradicate polio, in which women play crucial roles raising awareness and vaccinating children. Afghanistan and its neighbour, Pakistan, are the last 2 countries where the wild polio virus is still endemic, and the campaign is going full bore to wipe it out by the end of this year. The UN sent a senior female official, and Taliban ministers have since said they plan to draw up new guidelines to allow Afghan women to work in some humanitarian operations. It's worth remembering that this year Afghanistan is the biggest humanitarian aid program in the world ever. Mr. Griffiths, the UN's Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, said. This year, agencies will try to reach 28 million Afghans, more than half the population, including 6 million who are, Mr. Griffiths says, knocking on famine's door. This year is Afghanistan's coldest winter in a decade, and it's been cruel. In the past 2 weeks, more than 126 Afghans have perished in freezing temperatures. Turkey has condemned the burning of a copy of the Quran during a protest in Sweden, describing it as a vile act. It said the Swedish government's decision to allow the protest to go ahead was completely unacceptable. This comes amid growing diplomatic tension between the two countries. Turkey, which had appealed to Sweden to stop the protest, earlier called off a visit by Sweden's defence minister, Paul Johnson, saying the trip had lost its significance and meaning. It was hoped the trip could dispel Ankara's objections to the Scandinavian country joining the NATO military alliance. Turkey has so far held up both Sweden and Finland's NATO applications. Turkey wants political concessions, including the deportation of critics of its president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and Kurds that it claims are terrorists. Turkey is already a NATO member, which means it can block another country from joining. France has some 400 special forces based in Burkina Faso to help their local forces battle the Islamist insurgency that has spread across the Sahel from Mali over the past decade. Burkina Faso's military government has demanded the departure of French troops stationed in the country, the West African nation's national television reported. The tension revolves around perceptions that France's military presence in Burkina Faso has not improved security in the insurgent-hit West African country. An estimated 110,000 people packed the streets of Tel Aviv in one of Israel's biggest anti-government protests in the past decade. The rallies spread across the city centre as barriers were hoisted calling for an end to the ruling coalition, which is the most right-wing and religious nationalist in Israel's history. This is a dangerous government, said Yara Ben Garaloff, a teacher from Jaffa. This government will not be any good for women, for LGBTQ, for the impoverished people, and of course for Palestinians, she said. It's the second week running that mass protests have taken place in 4 different cities. Opposition leader Yair Lapid addressed the crowds in Tel Aviv, saying, "People who love this country came to defend its democracy and its courts. We won't give up until we win," he said. This comes 3 weeks after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu returned to power to form Israel's first stable coalition in 3 years. He said, Israelis voted for a full right-wing government and for security. His coalition contains far-right parties, including one whose leader was once convicted of anti-Arab racism, and another who is openly homophobic and misogynistic. See this video. On Sunday, a Palestinian from Jerusalem, Sally Azar, became its first woman pastor at an event at the Lutheran Church in the heart of the Old City, attended by hundreds of international well-wishers. "I got more excited seeing the excitement of other people," Reverend Azar said. It's an indescribable feeling to take this step with the support of the Church. I hope that many girls and women will know this is possible and that other women in other churches will join us. I know it will take a long time, but I think it could be exciting if this changes Palestine. Most Christians belong to the Greek Orthodox and Latin Catholic churches, which do not allow women priests. However, the ordination of women has been taking place in a growing number of Protestant churches in the past few decades. These have small local congregations and run schools and hospitals in the Holy Land. A top Indian university cut off power and internet supply on campus before a screening by its students' union of a BBC documentary on Prime Minister Narendra Modi that India has dismissed as propaganda. The Jawaharlal Nehru University in the capital New Delhi had threatened disciplinary action if the documentary was screened, saying the move might disturb peace and harmony on campus. Modi's government has ridiculed the documentary, which questioned his leadership during deadly riots in his home state of Gujarat in 2002. They blocked its airing and also barred sharing of any clips via social media in the country. A person present with students inside campus said the documentary was now being watched on mobile phones through links shared over Telegram and Vimeo after the power went out. See this video. The Church of England last week said it wants to offer blessings to gay couples, but would not allow priests to marry them. This week, the Archbishop of Canterbury said he will not personally use the proposed new prayers to bless same-sex couples. Justin Welby said he celebrates the change, but he has a responsibility for the whole communion. The Church also issued a formal apology for the shameful times it had rejected or excluded LGBTQ plus people. In contrast to Archbishop Welby's stance, the Archbishop of York said he will offer the prayers which he believes puts the Church in a better place, becoming tearful as he made his statement. See this video.
I'm really pleased it's changing for my, gay friends. I'm really pleased. And no, it's not enough for some, and I'm really sorry it's not enough. And I wasn't expecting to get emotional. But I am. Because I think it puts the Church of England in a better place. And I really hope that we can hold together our unity. And I cry out for those who hate what we're doing.
The Catholic Safeguarding Standards Agency will carry out a review into the Diocese of Hexham and Newcastle. The BBC understands it involves claims from a whistleblower that men were regularly drinking on the St Mary's Cathedral complex during lockdown 2021. The inquiry is also expected to examine the suicide of Canon Michael McCoy. Father McCoy, Dean of St Mary's Cathedral, killed himself in April 2021, days after police began an inquiry into a historical child sex abuse allegation made against him. Thousands assembled in Washington on Friday, January the 20th, to participate in this year's edition of the anti-abortion March for Life on the National Mall, where throngs celebrated the fall of Roe v. Wade while expressing trepidation as the abortion debate moves to individual states. Jean Mancini, president of the March for Life, opened up the 50th iteration of the rally by noting it was the first march in post-Roe America, prompting cheers from the crowd. But she was quick to dispel any notion that the anti-abortion movement has slowed following the Supreme Court's decision to end nearly 5 decades of nationwide abortion access. "We will march until abortion is unthinkable," Mancini said, sparking another roar of approval from the crowd. Hamline University retracted its characterization of an adjunct professor as Islamophobic on Tuesday, January the 18th, and has revised a previous statement about academic freedom. The retraction comes in the wake of a firestorm of criticism after the St. Paul, Minnesota University did not renew the contract of the adjunct, who showed a 14th century painting of the Prophet Muhammad in her online class last semester. The change in the university's position came on the same day the adjunct professor sued the university in Minnesota District Court, alleging religious discrimination and defamation. Churches are closing at rapid numbers in the USA, researchers say, as congregations dwindle across the country and a younger generation of Americans abandon Christianity altogether, even as faith continues to dominate American politics. As the US adjusts to an increasingly non-religious population, thousands of churches are closing each year in the country, a figure that experts believe may have accelerated since the COVID-19 pandemic. Pope Francis has criticized laws that criminalize homosexuality as unjust, saying, "God loves all his children just as they are," and calling on Catholic bishops who support the laws to welcome LGBTQ plus people into the church. "Being homosexual isn't a crime," Francis said on Tuesday in an interview. Francis acknowledged that Catholic bishops in some parts of the world support laws that criminalize homosexuality or discriminate against LGBTQ plus people, and he himself referred to the issue in terms of sin, but he attributed such attitudes to cultural backgrounds and said bishops in particular need to undergo a process of change to recognize the dignity of everyone. "These bishops have to have a process of conversion, he said, adding that they should apply tenderness, please, as God has for each one of us. Francis's comments were hailed by gay rights advocates as a milestone. They're the first uttered by a pope about such laws. Gay rights advocates say the antiquated laws are used to justify harassment and point to new legislation such as the Don't Say Gay law in Florida, which forbids instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity from kindergarten up to 3rd grade as evidence of continued efforts to marginalize LGBTQ plus people. Francis said the Catholic Church can and should work to put an end to these unjust laws. "It must do this, he said. "We are all children of God, and God loves us as we are, and for the strength that each of us fights for our dignity," Francis said. This week's Free Thought Hour, the show that follows this news, features Alan Colquhoun, who has prepared a slideshow on philosophy, consciousness, and moral values for us to talk about. You can join in by texting your comments and questions. It's live and it's free. And don't forget to watch Views on the News. our spin-off show where a panel of opinionated people get a chance to express their views on this very news. The GAN team will be back with our weekly news report next week. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, and set the notifications. This has been Global Atheist News. Thank you for watching.